All right, everybody, welcome to the session. Extremely excited to be here. I know Danilo and Colin are as well. My name is Jason Fishkind. I'll be moderating the session. For some background on me, I've been in the software world for 15 years. I've been with Sprinkler for the last 10 years, and then recently joined People AI. I've been there just over a year running the East for the company. Colin.
That's awesome, Jason. And thanks everyone for joining today. Dialing in from Huntington, New York on Long Island. I know Jason formerly from Long Island as well. And I'm calling in from Orem, Vice President of Sales at Orem. Also been in the SaaS sales world for over a decade. Orem is a live conversation platform helping your reps have more conversations over the phone live with your target market here. So excited to be here and be on the panel.
Hey, everyone. Thanks again for joining. You got thanks 3 times. We really appreciate you listening to us. And we're hoping here that we can share some nuggets of wisdom that'll help everybody out there in their sales process. My name is Danilo Nikolic. I head up the sales team for Rollworks. I've got sales and the SDR team under me. I've been here for almost 4 years. We're in the account-based marketing space. Have a couple decades of experience in the software space. For you that remember PeopleSoft, I started there, worked with companies like Aruba Networks, Symantec, Marketo, and now with Rollworks. So happy to be here and share some little nuggets of success.
Awesome. Gentlemen, ready to get started?
Let's do it.
Yes.
Perfect. So we're going to have a fun conversation about survival strategies and scaling in the wilderness of recession and our current macro. So maybe we'll start in thinking about some of the unique challenges and opportunities for scaling during a downturn and what we're all currently experiencing. Danilo, maybe I'll start with you. The current economic environment has certainly created some challenges for sales teams and for all of us. What's your best advice for enabling sales success during a downturn?
Yeah, I mean, and I'm going to share some details here because I want to get as specific as possible. So some of these may be applicable for, your environment and some not, right? So, the biggest thing for me really is when you're going through something like this, right? And I've been around for a while, so I've seen a few of these ups and downs. So first off, let me put you at ease. We're going to get through this and we'll be stronger on the other side, right? What they say is never waste a crisis, right? So this is perfect time for you to, do a little introspective, draw on your past behavior, but really reach out there to peers like Jason and Colin to, make sure you get the best advice possible, right? So the big thing to me, what I would say is probably focus is absolutely critical, right? And so the big thing to highlight when it comes to focus, in my world is just stick to the right targets, right? Make sure that if you are going after, a specific vertical or, part of the market, that you can really break down even within that area. What are some of the top accounts that you want to reach out to? So there's technologies out there that are available that will tell you, if your target market is 10,000 accounts, what are the top 500 that you want to reach out to that, for example, are showing intent on third-party sites that are engaging with your, organization, of course, and, be very, very rigorous around identifying what are your top, 300 accounts you want to get into, what are the next, 300 and so forth, right? That focus is critical. If you just, operate business as usual, you're going to miss a lot of opportunities. The other piece of it is flexibility in the sales process, right? So again, I'm going to bring something up that's very specific for our environment, but it might be something that works for somebody else, right? So typically we think about, competition from a standpoint, it's either us or them, right? Like, how can I beat my competitor? How do I displace them? What's happening in the market today is people are operating with a lot less resources, right? So the challenge is, how can I rip and replace something that takes a lot of resources, dedication, and so forth? So figure out, is there a way for you to coexist in their environment? Maybe there's a portion of the competition that, their product doesn't do as well as yours. How can you make it economical for them so they feel like they're not double paying, even though they're getting two separate things, from each side of the competition, right? Now, again, I know that this is not possible everywhere, but this is something to maybe reevaluate in your sales process.
Totally.
The other piece here that I would touch on as well is, if you can really get some commitment on paid POCs. We talk about, like, well, let's see what they can do. Let's see what we can do. A lot of times it's not like it's a 50-50. If you feel like, hey, we have an 80% chance here, they're really leaning towards us, but maybe they're, fear of committing because of one reason or another. Box out your competition, get them to commit to a paid POC that's structured, that is, has the elements of success, upfront contract, all that kind of good stuff. So at the end of it, you can sign that 12-month deal, 24-month deal, right? Totally. And then, sorry, Jason, were you going to jump in with something?
No, keep going. I was just agreeing.
Yep. And one other thing that and look, this is Captain Obvious stuff here, but I'm going to bring it up anyway. Tie it to the company objectives, right? And a lot of times, right? And, our sales team as well, it's like we're you're selling to, let's say, the HR department, or you're selling to the marketing team. You forget about the company objectives, right? And a lot of times, people have OKRs. Those OKRs trickle down, and there's like a breadcrumb that's going to combine this to this. And so that is super, super important, because what's going to happen, especially this day and age, it's going to end up on the CFO's desk. It's going to end up on the CEO's desk. Mm-hmm. They have no idea who you are or what your product does, right? Unless you're like an Oracle or, a massive organization that has, brand awareness and everything. They have no idea who you are. So they're immediately going to know, what the heck is this about, right? And so, some of the stuff that, you do is you create these business cases and all that kind of stuff, but without tying it to those top level goals and actually showing how they're going to get from here to here, it's going to be crucial. Again, Captain Obvious stuff, but I got to bring it up. And last but not least, that I'll bring up is just, don't do it alone. Double down on partnerships. And I'm talking about all kinds of partnerships, right? Whether it's you're thinking about it from a VAR perspective, right? Or whether you're thinking about it from a perspective of ecosystem partners, right? It's huge, so double down on that. It's a win-win for, both organizations. So
yeah, absolutely. So
the answer there, Jason.
So lots of great, as you said, you're going to give some nuggets, lots of great nuggets. We're going to get through this, right? Focus is critical. Be on the right accounts. Be flexible in sales process and in the financials. Think about paid POCs. Make sure you're tying to company objectives. Think about partnerships. Colin, my man, what else do you have that's best advice for enabling sales success during a downturn?
Danilo covered the gamut of the playbook. I love it. I think, like, I'll double click on a few areas that Danilo shared and pull back a little bit as well and say, I think motivation and within that theme of focus that Danilo started with, it's focusing in on core high scoring accounts, right? Not chasing shiny objects or foul balls, however you call them, right? Like, because your resources and your time are finite. I think the teams that get hyper focused and really avoid as much distraction as possible in this environment are going to win. They're gonna excel, right? In the age of distraction, getting your people hyper focused on who you serve and serve best, and and where you have the highest win rates and the highest chances of success. I totally agree, Danilo. I think that's that TAM, SAM, SOM, right, type of like narrowing in there is so key. And I'm so bullish on partnerships as well, Danilo. Like just like you said, what's that expression? Like rising tides raise all ships. And we're trying to rise all of our ships together here. And we've been doing a lot of, co-marketing with partners like this, and but also co-selling and helping one another with referrals and references. And yeah, I think on one extreme end, it's just referral partnerships. The other extreme, doing actual resellers and value-added resellers, like you mentioned, VARs is a great idea. I think in this environment, especially, getting back to some of the core basics of, in terms of zooming out, just the blocking and tackling of your sales enablement and keeping your team really sharp in terms of their skill, in terms of their differentiation, in terms of how you do attach yourself to those big business initiatives, right? Like, we're a big medic shop. I know that other companies view that as their forecasting religion, and we do as well. And we've added our own letter to it. Okay, so we've created our own like sect of the medic religion, and we've added an F, and the F stands for financing or funding. And so you have to get crystal clear on where the funding or the financing is going to come from in your deals, right? Because it's one thing to know the decision process, the decision criteria, of course, the big business metric that you're attaching your product to. But in this environment, especially as Jason, Danilo, as you guys mentioned, the finance team being that final stakeholder that has to put the rubber stamp, we need to understand how they are planning to fund this project, this software, this spend. Where are they pulling the budget from? Especially you're catching someone mid-budget cycle, right? Like, budgets are frozen. They're frozen more so than ever before. So you got to catch them at the planning cycle. Or if you're coming in mid-year, it's not easy like it was in the past where you had discretionary funds. Jason, as an RVP, could swipe the credit card on discretionary spend, right? It needs to be budgeted. We need to show where it's coming from.
Right.
And so getting really clear on that, saying, hey, they're reducing spend on these three, services. We're not going to backfill this other admin, role. We're going to apply budget here, partner with other departments and collaborate, because it's a big business initiative, to find the funding and financing. So those are just a couple of ways to, sprinkle in some additions to everything Danilo shared here as well.
Yeah. And I wanted to just touch on something Colin brought up, right? I mean, it's absolutely crucial, right, from a sales process perspective that, a lot of times they say, sales reps are coin operated, right? I think the best sales reps that I've ever, had the pleasure of working with are, simply curious by nature, right? And so curiosity to me is like the number one thing I look for, in a sales rep. And at this point, it's something that could really differentiate you, in the sales process, right? So that's something that, it's some of us innately have and are just morbidly curious about just about everything out there. And some people are very much, here's the qualification questions, here's the discovery questions I need to ask. And so one thing that we're actually doubling down on from a training perspective here internally at Rollworks is that discovery piece, and really diving that layer deeper, right, into what is the second level of questions or the third level of questions. And so, a big portion of that, and this is something that I would, want to share with everybody out there, is that, you got to do role plays. Don't get me wrong, you're listening to calls, but you don't run into a lot of scenarios on calls. And so, do a service to yourself where you go in there and you create these, nightmare scenarios where you can really riff, through some of them. And then that way, when you take a call, it's cakewalk, but, you have the strategy and the training behind it, right, to be able to jump in and address those, right?
Totally.
So just wanted to share that one nugget.
Oh, love it. It's great commentary from both of you. are you both familiar with the book Fanatical Prospecting? Jeb Blount, I think, is the name of
Sure.
it.
Yeah, I heard it.
Is the
I haven't had
author.
to read it yet.
So there's a concept in there that is it's a simple concept. It's simple, not easy, right? And I think what both of you just talked about at length, the one thing my biggest takeaway personally from that little portion of the discussion was just about focus, and the ability to go focus on so many potentially different things, doing it really well, whether being really curious and going really deep and focusing on that, right? Or focusing on the right accounts. Well, one question for both of you, when I think about just sales success in general, whether it's an economic downturn or not, I had an old CRO I worked for, a McMahon disciple, a guy named Luca Lazzarone, and he would always say, he's Italian, say, I always go by fish, no champion, no deal, right? And I think about champion building, right? And I think, so what do you guys think about personal wins, right? Especially in an economic downturn, right? Like, what do you think about personal wins? How do you go about thinking about how you go find personal wins? I think that's so critical to the process.
Yeah. You want to hit it first or not? Either one.
Yeah, I'll tell you what. I've had this conversation a few times, with people where it's, it turns into, what I always like to pivot into is best practices conversations. And the reason I do that is because, we stopped talking about product, right? We started talking about best practices sessions, what I've seen in the past work, right? And then it slowly leads into what are you focused there internally on? Are you seeing the same challenges? How are you guys doing things, right? So we're not talking about the product. Let's say we're talking about, their SDR team, right? Is their, SDR team just following up, for example, on just the one lead that they're getting, or are they taking that lead as the tip of the spear and then going into other parts of the business and other decision makers and leveraging that data point to then get further, into that account, right? To book a meeting or whatever, right?
Sure.
And undoubtedly what ends up happening is you really take that discovery to the next level because you have them start opening up about the frustrations they have, right? And the problems they deal with, to your point, Jason, on a personal level, right? And what the complaints are and so forth. And so that's really, when I was talking about the discovery earlier, the place that you want to get to, because then you're not just solving the company objective that, he can defend internally, but he's got a personal stake in it.
Yeah.
Or she.
Oh, absolutely. Colin, go ahead.
Yeah, no, Danilo, I totally agree, right? And Jason, right, part of the definition of a champion that there is a personal win, because they have to be motivated to sell on your behalf, right? And what is sales at its root, no matter how complex of a deal, right? It's an emotional transference, right? Like it starts as an emotional connection. There could be a multitude of ways to solve some sort of problem that someone is facing or a big business initiative, but to get someone attached to championing your service, your specific solution to solve their biggest business initiatives, you need to really figure out how you best serve that personal win. And Harvard Business Review did a study, I don't know, many years ago that we had read around what is the fastest way to get promoted in the large enterprise. And they found it wasn't performance, it wasn't tenure, it was initiatives. So attaching yourselves to big initiatives in the business, right? You find a champion that is personally motivated to see a big initiative be successful. It's going to impact the next earnings call. It's going to impact that company on the largest level. For them, from a career perspective, that's an express elevator to that next level. Even and they did a big study beyond performance and tenure. It was initiative, the success of an initiative that the people were a part of. So you think about that just from a career progression perspective, right? A personal win, like finding someone that's attached to the biggest initiatives in the business is key. But of course, the personal pains that you might be fixing for them, and just other motivations, right? Maybe it's more time with their family or other things there. Of course, like those, I think those things are also, important to suss out as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And by the way, the biggest initiatives in any of these companies are likely the ones tied to the biggest fires, which, by the way, in an economic downturn are probably the ones that are apt to get the most dollars attached, right? So, love it. So let's move on, gentlemen, if that's okay. So we're also going to talk about some strategies and tactics to adapt business models and optimizing operations to continue to grow. So what steps has your revenue teams taken to adapt your models and to optimize operations? Who wants to take that one first?
I could give it a stab.
Sure.
It really depends on the size of your company in terms of the answer that I'm gonna give here. But typically when you're in a startup, right, a smaller organization, you're wearing a lot of hats. There's a lot of crossover. There's a lot of synergies. But as the teams, continue to grow and you go into a mid-market or, enterprise, type of environment, what I typically seen, because I've worked for all size companies, right? And right now we're, roughly mid-size here at Rollworks. The challenge that you have is that you'll create these silos, right? And it's not done for malicious intent. People are just trying to get organized, right? So, they're trying to, create these, like a manufacturing plant. What is that? Assembly line, right? So, you do this, then it gets handed to this, and then they do their thing, and so on and so forth, right? And so the one thing that we're doing here internally is taking a closer look at those and seeing if they're really that necessary, right? And then also trying to involve everybody, in those different departments, into understanding what's happening across the board, so pulling them into those weekly WBRs, right, or the weekly business reviews, right? And so everybody needs to understand the challenges and the pain points that each team is actually facilitating, rather than, having these blinders off and having this rigidity built in around, well, this is how we do things here, right? You need to understand the give and take, and either start to break those silos down, or the other piece of this is creating a common goal for people. So I'll tell you what the sales, the SDR team, as well as the marketing team, we're all looking at qualified pipeline. We're not even looking at appointments. We're not looking at sales accepted meetings. We have this stage of like, hey, it's entering qualified pipeline. We know what our close rate is with this qualified pipeline. We're trying to improve on it, of course, right? You're always trying to make things better. But if you get everybody tied around that same goal, then, some of this other stuff that people do that, really doesn't matter starts to fall off, right? And people really need to understand that, right? And, just empathize with it. So that's the type of stuff, right? And this goes not just in a environment where we're talking about teams like sales, SDR, and marketing. This involves like security, for example, legal, right? How do we figure out what that balance is? What's that give or take? Negotiate internally ahead of time, so that way this, you got to sometimes close deals twice, right? Externally and then internally. So you guys laughing. So, but look, everybody's on the same page. We all want to succeed. So as much as you can have those conversations internally, so people understand each other, empathize with each other, understand what the true give and take is, it will just streamline you internally and make you a lot more effective, presenting, to the customer.
Absolutely. Ton of great elements in there, Daniil. Thank you. So, Colin, what say you around adapting business models and optimizing operations?
I mean, So I guess like a two part there, right? So like optimizing operations, I think Danilo really nailed it. And if I could sum it up in one word, which I totally agree with, it's alignment, right? That like on the operation side, like what you described, Danilo, I totally agree. And as you scale, you have to intentionally seek out alignment. You mentioned OKRs earlier, right? That's a great framework. Getting large company objectives and key results that kind of trickle down to each stakeholder and department. That's a method. That's a framework that we use at Orem, and also one that we use back at Namely. We actually had built a software for OKRs back at Namely because it was such a big part of the performance culture there. And so, yeah, you have to be intentional about that within your culture as you scale. On the business model side, you got to look at your metrics. You got to look at your conversion rates. You got to look at your retention rates, your growth rates, your margins, and look at the whole value chain and see, what has changed. Like is inbound changed? Does that mean we need to make up the difference in outbound? Do the same marketing channels we used in the past have the same type of conversion rates that they did in the past? And before you react to any one, metric, like zoom out holistically, right? With the other members involved. It could be the SDR team, could be the marketing team, it could be something changed in terms of finance and the way we're structuring, payments. And so I think, the clearer vision you have, and this is where I believe like a RevOps model really serves well, right? Because if you think about like a true RevOps model, it's meant to be like that crossbeam to help with alignment. And when I've seen great revenue operations teams functioning, they've got that model built across the business, right? And then you can start to forecast and you can start to really model any one change on any of the levers in your equation, right, of the business. You can start to see the sensitivity, right? The sensitivity of if we lower ACV because of price pressure due to competition, what does that do? How much pipeline do we need to make up there? If we're seeing win rates drop, if we're seeing, sales cycles get longer because of the additional buying committees, where else can we make up the difference? And so getting back to that repeatable sales motion and that predictability, becomes all the more important. And so I think the teams that get, the best picture of their business and that alignment, back to Danilo's point, and start to just play with the millimeters, right? I believe we're going to have be set up the best for success, right? And I'm not saying any of this is easy, right? Going back to the grid you were talking about before, Jason, but we're all work in progress. And I'd say like it's a big area of investment we focused on is our RevOps modeling and that cross-beam view of the business, and not reacting to any one metric, but looking at the holistic picture.
Yeah. If I can jump in on what Colin said, because he made a distinction between RevOps and sales ops. And I think there's a lot of teams out there that don't have a RevOps team. And I have no idea what Colin is talking about in terms of, what a true RevOps team is, right? And so I'm lucky we have one that is amazingly, equipped that, can, not just do sales updates and, run reports and stuff like that, but the modeling and inform, business decisions. So, that's something that's absolutely critical for any business that's scaling, is to really double down on having a revenue operations team, not a sales ops team. You really need a RevOps team.
Yeah.
1,000%. Entirely agree. Fortunate to have some great colleagues in that respect too. Let's actually stay on that topic a bit, because I think RevOps would play a big role in this next question. Let's think about uncovering new markets or new products or new revenue streams to drive expansion, right? RevOps will probably play a role in that a lot. What kind of strategies would you recommend to help sales teams identify and explore new markets or new products or new revenue streams? Colin, you want to take this one first?
Yeah, I happy to take a stab at this one. So, looking at your core product, right? Like, and figuring out what other problem? I mean, look, you kind of simplify it like this. Like, if you really think about it, like, what is the core problem that you solve? And then what are complementary problems that might be in one small step over that create a brand new blue ocean for you, right? That blue ocean analogy of where there's immediate, excitement and pain and not a ton of competition, and you can quickly capture revenue share. And so, for example, like Orem, where we are a what we call a live conversation platform, really the smartest phone system for salespeople. Now, what do you need with a phone system? Well, you need good data, right? So adding either through partnership or through your through resale, creating a revenue stream around providing better data to our customers has been a great complementary stream. What else can you do with the conversation? Maybe you need some coaching modules, so creating some intelligent coaching, wrapped around that. And so you start to think about it holistically. And back at Namely, right? I know you were at PeopleSoft, right? We were an HCM, a human capital management system at Namely. Well, what else do HR folks need? They need great performance management. They need great talent acquisition. They need great payroll. And so you start to do it all. And a lot of Namely people went and started Rippling, and some of these other ones. So you start to look at the holistic picture of where you can holistically help your customers. And, some of them might be obvious, right? Like, hey, do we want to go pursue that? There's some point solutions there that have kind of proven there's a market, right? You could look at it from that perspective. Like, what has reduced your risk that people are willing to pay some other point solution there? Could be a great signal for you. And does it make sense to then acquire one of those point solutions versus build or partner? Right. I think, as revenue executives, you start to really think about that and, time to value and the synergies between yourselves and those businesses. And so just, a couple ideas there.
Awesome. Yeah, I echo that, and I'll plug Orem as well. Great technology from a calling perspective. It makes me feel old, like, when I'm talking about calls and nobody wants to make any calls these days. I'm like, no, that's the way to do it. Because what people forget about calls is that you're not just trying to go in there and book a meeting. That is absolutely one of the pieces, but the other piece, and this is a tip for anybody out there, that's doubling down on calling, is call the wrong people. I know it sounds crazy, but do it, right? Because calling the wrong people and saying, "Oh, I'm sorry, Colin, I thought you were responsible for that, but since I have you on the phone, can you tell me what's going on in this other team? I'll take you off our list." Oh, thank God, this guy Danilo, I don't know who he is going to take me off the list. You will be amazed what you'll find out over a conversation and about internal politics and so on and so forth, so double down on that. Couple other tools that, I really want to, shout out there. There's this company called User Gems that, keeps track of people that are moving. I mean, we're talking about, revenue streams. If somebody's moving from one of your customers to a prospect account, you want to know about that right away, right? And that's going to be low-hanging fruit. Pick it up, run with it, right? There's another tool out there, I don't know if you use this, is called Crossbeam. So you can understand within a number of different organizations, what are the technologies that they're utilizing, and perhaps connect even with the sales reps at those, partner accounts to gather intelligence and so forth, right? But the other thing is you got to take some risks, so experimentation is key. I want to make sure that we're experimenting in expanded ICPs in a really thoughtful manner, right? So what I mean by that is do pilots. You don't have to pivot all, oh, hey, team, all of us are going to move over here. No. Pick out 2 or 3 key individuals on your SDR, on your sales team. Try another vertical where you're seeing, you landed a couple customers, you want to expand, there's a strong value prop, right? So controlled environments where you can test that out are going to be crucial.
Awesome. Perfect. I know we're getting near time, so I want to be mindful of it. call a slight audible on the last question, but I think it's a really important one. There's a number of sales leaders on the line, and on certain times, navigating risk and being resilient is really critical. And as sales leaders, the three of us, right? I think how we help our people navigate that risk and be resilient is really critical. How do you build a culture of resiliency and adaptability? I love this topic, by the way, so I have to ask the question.
Yeah, I guess happy to take a crack at this. I mean, I think you have to be intentional with your candidate profile. I'd say like on the front end, right? Like who you hire, and think about, from like a grittiness perspective and resilient perspective and adaptability perspective, and in your interview and hiring process, asking questions to really peel back the onion on that person and their character, and why they've made certain choices in their life that led them to this moment, and what challenges they may have overcome, either personally or professionally, and just flat out even asking them, for examples of, where they faced, a sudden change either in a past business or in their life, and how they coped with it or overcame it, or challenges, and their perspective, like reflecting back upon it, can reveal a lot about their character. I think you reduce a lot of that, uncertainty and risk about a member of the sales team up front, of course, right? We all wish we hire AA plus players up front, of course. I'll say like in the in the tight hiring market, I think just a year ago or a year and a half ago, we had to play a bit of money ball to look for folks. Like we weren't finding, the typical SaaS candidates, and that actually for us voted, fairly well, because we were forced to like do this money ball analysis of what other industries are just super competitive and gritty and people need to adapt. And so I kid you not, some of our top performers today worked at Michelin star restaurants, like in the kitchen. They were like sous chefs in New York City, and coming from some of these other hyper competitive alternative industries that you just know that they've gone through the crucible, and nothing's going to phase them, right? I think maybe hiring vets, folks that have gone through that type of experience as well, and we have a couple of them on the team, which we're proud to have as well. So I think candidate profile there is super helpful. But yeah, it's on the hiring side.
I love it. Yeah, so that's on the hiring side. Oh, that's great. Maybe Daniil, we've brought them in, right? They're part of the team. How do you build continue the culture of resilience and adaptability once they're there?
Yeah, no doubt. One thing before we move on from that, I want to double down on what Colin said in terms of hiring, because that is absolutely a crucial piece that we interview for. And it's funny because we pretty much have very similar interview questions that we're asking, which is great. We're gonna have to trade some notes, Colin, after this. But the one thing, one other piece, I think I mentioned the curiosity thing, but look, like if you look at someone like myself, I wanted to be a teacher originally. I had a passion for that, and my degree is in chemistry, and I haven't done anything in over 25 years with chemistry, right? I don't remember most of it, right? But the big feature there, or the big personality trait there that I look for, is the propensity to learn and the willingness to learn, right? Because going back to Colin, what you were saying, right? You hire people from a diverse background, different way of thinking about things. If they had the propensity and the interest to learn, oh man, it's a unbelievable kind of combination to me, right? So I just wanted to double down on that, because I 100% agree with you, Colin, on that. Now once you have them on board, the big thing to me is eliminate the risk associated with failure as much as you can, right? So a lot of times the people are kind of apprehensive about doing new stuff and trying new things, is how that's going to affect their comp, how it's going to affect the standing with the company and so forth, right? So if, they feel comfortable with you giving them that backing, because I've been in situations where I just kept people whole from a financial perspective so they can literally give it their all. Don't worry about this. I'm going to take care of you. I want you to try and figure it out. Right. Because what happens is once they engage, undoubtedly you're going to be like, well, then all this is not really working out, man. I'm missing my number, all this kind of stuff. And so you're not 2 feet in. Right. That's the biggest problem. What I think with really giving something a, fair shake. So maybe that little nugget helps.
I think that's great. Yeah. No, I'm thinking like, it's like in my head, I'm like, yeah, maybe you're experimenting with like a new enterprise, segment, and you're asking someone to take the risk, like showing you back them, right? Like, it's almost like putting a rep on full ramp, again, like, for example, like just, I think, yeah.
100%.
Yeah. There's an element of empathy, right? Leading with empathy and understanding and building a trust and truly knowing the person and, in that way, right, to enable them to feel comfortable, to be adaptable, and to have them believe in themselves to be resilient, right?
Yeah, it's trust is what it comes down to, right?
Sure.
That's the biggest component here. If you have that trust in that individual that they are the right person for it, they've demonstrated it. Take away anything that's going to cause pause for them, unleash them, right?
Absolutely. So, gentlemen, this is a phenomenal discussion. I know I have tons of key takeaways, but my job is just to ask the questions here. So, who would like to go first? Maybe a handful of takeaways from each of you.
Sorry, Jason, you're probably better at summarizing all the things I said than I am, to be honest.
What are your takeaways, Jason? How are you feeling? Yeah.
So what I love that you started with, Daniil, was just thinking about economic downturn, which I'm sure at some point it'll be shown we're in it right now, which is we're gonna get through this. I mean, I graduated college in just before like 2008 financial crisis, lived through the next recession, and here we are again, right? So like you get through this, there's a lot of folks in the working world never been through a recession, right? And
100%.
They're used to the S&P and the Dow at these crazy highs, and everything's hunky dory, but it's not. This is the natural cycle. But I loved what you said is we're gonna get through this. The other things I took away from what you said before was just what focus is critical. Be flexible, and you talk about in your financials or the sales process, but I think flexibility and adaptability are always beneficial to you, whether in a downturn or in a phenomenal market. You guys talked about hyper focused, bullish on partnerships, and then Colin, you talked about just being really good at the basics, the core basics, the blocking and tackling. And that's why I think I added in about just things are simple. All these concepts are simple, right? But not easy to always think about. You guys talked about taking a good look at your processes, right? And having alignment between the teams across RevOps and finance and all the different groups. Like, how do you break down the silos, have everyone working together, fully aligned, making sure you've got the business model and the business metrics that everyone is working towards, and having a great RevOps ideally a RevOps team, not just a sales ops, but a RevOps team working together. And then ultimately we talked about new markets, right? Hey, how do we figure out what's the core problem we solve? What are the adjacencies? And then to summarize the last bit we just talked through, was being, I think, really intentional, finding curious folks, right? Curious folks I think would adapt naturally to all the elements you guys talked about. I had this conversation with someone the other day, and they asked me, what's the number one characteristic I look for when I'm hiring someone? It is undoubtedly instinctively curiosity. So I'm in full agreement. I'm in violent agreement on that, actually. Anything I missed, gentlemen, as a key takeaway?
I'll just leave you with one thought. It's one of those scenarios where, and you hear this term a lot, and I'd like to maybe shift this term a little bit for folks, is you hear do more with less. And the trouble that I have with that term is that, it implies that, you got to work harder, that, we kill ourselves, right? Obviously the folks on this call probably are not good examples of work-life balance, but that's something that's important, right? So I would like to shift this more from do more with less to do what matters, right? And goes back to Jason, what you were saying about, the focus piece, right? That's where, you need to go to. It's important to have a life, outside of this. We have clearly the folks on this call have a very big passion for what we do. We love it. But, at the same time, you got to figure out what that balance is in prioritization, so I want to make sure everybody hears it from
Absolutely.
someone working
Colin,
small hours, so.
And before I wrap with one last, Colin, I'll give you the final word here.
I think you both summed it up, quite well here, and I totally agree. Like, try and make yourself indistractable. The more that's how you're going to win. Motivation is like bathing; it's recommended daily, right? Keeping your mindset positive and well, and your team focus, and you will freaking crush. You will win. So this was awesome, guys, and thanks everyone in the audience here as well.
Yes,
yeah,
I just wrote that. I wrote that down. Motivation is like bathing, recommended daily. I love that. So we'll leave on that note. Motivation is like bathing, recommended daily. Danilo, Colin, thank you so much for doing this. For all of you who attended, thank you so much for joining, and thank you to the Modern Sales Pro community. We look forward to seeing you guys next time. Talk soon.